also very, very acutely aware that we are right in the middle of lunch and evening tea, right? Which means it's our responsibility to keep you all awake and not doze off. So we'll do our best to live up to that expectation. But let me start by talking about three numbers. And these are the three numbers that really define what this panel is about. The first number is 100. 100 companies in India make up 50% of all of the CSR money that is spent in India. Just 100. There are 14,000 companies that spend on CSR, but 100 out of 14,000 is 50%. It's a huge number. Very rarely will you see that level of concentration. The second number is 10. It's been 10 years since CSR has been going on in India, legally mandated CSR. No other country in the world does it. No other country in the world has data on what happens when CSR is legally mandated to any level of degree, to any degree close to what India does. And we have actually fairly good data available. Not perfect, but not bad either. And the third number is 1. At the end of the day, it takes one individual to make a decision. And in the world of that CSR, in the world of CSR, that person is invariably the CSR head, who's either convinced or not, who either has the conviction to take that step and make a difference or not, right? The four panelists that you see here with me are very, very familiar with these numbers. They're all in that position of being the one person where the buck stops, and they need to make that final decision on what to do and what to say no to. They've all been in CSR for this entire 10-year duration, and they've seen how CSR has changed grounds up. And they're all leading organizations which are in that top 100. So when they talk about what the next 10 years of CSR is going to be, it truly is an indicator of what those 10 years will be, because they are very, very large determinants of setting those examples for the rest of the sector. And that's what we're hoping to listen from them as we go through this over the next 45 minutes. I'm going to get started by requesting Sakina, and then all of the others, to very, very briefly, literally in one sentence each, tell us about their history in CSR and why is it that they're here today, and why is it that they believe they have a view of the future that we should all be listening to.
It's working? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear myself. Thank you for this session. It's an extremely important session because whether we are CSR heads or not, whether we are part of social development space or whether we work in NGOs, it really doesn't make a difference. What makes the difference is, are we able to look back and see the successes as well as the failures? And for me, to begin with my thought on it, maybe a little introduction about myself. I have almost 21 years of experience in the social development space. 8 years of my professional life were in the non-profit sector and the rest in the corporate sector. Now, so I would say it's an advantage to myself in terms of my profession because I can see both sides of the world, whether it is non-profit or for-profit, and how they invest in the social development space in different ways that they want to. These past 10 years have been really, I've seen the plethora of change happening, how it started with non-serious to getting serious to getting really discussion into impact studies or impact analysis of the projects that you, at least in the corporate space. What I've also seen during these past 10 years is that non-profit organizations, while being at the receiving end, has also evolved a lot. Earlier being dependent on the ways of different funding, now they are really getting involved in trying to pursue CSR as not only as a funding option, but also a capacity building option. And I think that's a great thing that we can do, not only be funding partners with them, with the non-profit sector, but also being able to see whether we are able to build their capacities. 10 years have been a really mixed feeling for me in terms of a person who has been leading CSR in bigger corporates. It went from marketing to PR to input, output, now it's outcome. So you can see the shift, what is happening. And it's a great shift. It's so positive that we in the boardrooms are not talking about numbers. We're talking about impact? What is the impact it's creating for the people that the numbers that you are giving? So for me, that change is an amazing change, and I think it's going to grow in the next few years from now. What I see, the people who are being a part of such initiatives, whether at a corporate, at a non-profit organization, at a foundation, or even people who are volunteers into such initiatives, they have seen that change, they want to be a party into that change, they want to be responsible for that change. And for me, that's a positive trend. But at the same time, I see there's a lot of gap between the non-profit and for-profit, and we need to bridge that gap. I hope the next 10 years become that bridge where we are able to fulfill that gap between the for-profits and the non-profits. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakina. Ashwini, if you could very quickly tell us about your background and your history in CSR.
33 years. 33 years gone into inside the country, outside the country, multilaterals, government, NGOs, corporates. I think across various sectors, various geographies. I think that's what I think I've learned over the years. And then I'm going to talk on behalf of an institution which is almost 33 years old and which has a lot of firsts to its credit. Perhaps the first CSR institution in the country to be ISO 26000 certified, one of the first ones to get into impact investing, talking about skill development way back in 2005, talking about women economic empowerment from 2006 onwards, and perhaps the only, perhaps one of the few institutions which is focusing on sports, art, culture, heritage altogether. So we are not I would say, a gender-driven organization, we are a need-driven organization. So I'll stop at that.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I think we should, some of you are standing, please come this side. I know we are all worried about exit. I just saw there's an exit that side also. So the room is a little skewed and we are seeing a lot of empty chairs here. So please, and I would request people seated to just let more people come in. If you shifted, it will help them come in. So thanks for inviting IICR here. It's amazing. 10 years, yes, beautiful, terrific journey, but you also want us to say a little bit about my own journey. It's going to be 25 years in the development sector. I've worked at very grassroots levels. Very much I come from public healthcare space. And I think it was a very early decision that I made in my own career where I decided that one wants to work in development sector. In those times, it wasn't as defined. I am working as global CSR head, or you can say that the title goes as vice president. Those are corporate titles. But I look after the CSR agenda for HCL Tech, which is a technology company. And I head the HCL Foundation, which delivers the global CSR, or let's say the India CSR agenda in India, otherwise global. But overall, I think 10 years, and it was a fortunate step for me in person. I would say that I was able to join the CSR space in India, having done work both at grassroots levels within the country as well as in many international communities. One was part of the UN Sustainable Development Goal Setting Agenda also. And when that movement was going on across the world, I was closely involved in setting up goal number 16.2. And I had worked for a very long time. Many of my friends are here from child rights space. And the entire experience of seeing how grants are done, how grants are executed on ground, how decision making can happen bottom up. I had an opportunity to work in India when the law was just taking shape. From 2016, I joined the CSR space. And ever since, there has been, I would say, a beautiful uphill journey. As far as CSR is concerned, there weren't as many professionals in those times. I remember even for us to start the few initial projects that we started, we had to invite some of our NGOs who we knew had expertise in those domains, have a lot of conversation with them that these are the communities which also need attention, these are the areas which also need attention. And from then till now, 2023, you can already see it's a competitive space. It's very, very professional space. It has a mix of corporate, NGO, government. There are so many streams of there's so many professional streams, be it environment, health, skill development, education. You have specialists, you have M&E, you have whole lot of, I would say, expertise. So CSR law, as well as last 10 years, have been amazing in India, and there are challenges, but any space has those challenges. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Chetan, if you could just
Sure.
take us through your history as well.
Thanks a lot, Sumit, and thank you, CSRBOX, and Give Grants for inviting me to this panel. Delighted to be here. So about 21 years of experience in the social sector. And even though I'm here as the CSR head of Mahindra Foundation, but I look at myself as a social sector practitioner, because I think that's what I entered this space as back in the year 2001. And the last about 22 years have been kind of equally spaced between first being with a large NGO. I started my journey with Pratham, briefly with American India Foundation. And then the next phase was when I was more sort of entrepreneurial. I set up an NGO. I ran a consulting outfit called EduLever. And then since 2016, I've been with Mahindra Foundation, first as the COO and since last November as the CEO. So that's in brief the journey, Sumit, and therefore I think most of us who are here in this room are either of these three categories that I just mentioned. I think the beauty of the sector is that, you know, when you change hats, it's not like you take off the previous one, you just add on another hat. So the collective experience, therefore, of working closely on the ground, close to the ground, having traveled across the length and breadth of the country, looking at the education space grounds up, looking at what's been happening in the skill development space as well, has probably given some insights which I'll be happy to share in the course of the discussion today.
Thank you, Chetan. So all four of you come with enough and more experience within this space. And most of you have also been on the developmental sector side, right? Not just on the grant making side, but on the grant execution side as well. My next question really, and I would love to start with you, Ashwini, is about, we've done the 10-year journey. You are now in a position where you can actually set examples for the rest of the sector. Because you are amongst the largest grant makers in this country, whatever your companies do is what everybody else will also be looking at and emulating to a large extent. If there were no constraints, what would your dream 10 years be? What do you think the next 10 years of CSR should be and which you would love to do, assuming there were no constraints?
Okay. My entire focus in last 30 odd years has been about institution building, because I think it's institutions which outlive the objective and the program, and I think that's very important. So at the global level, if you ask me, my dream would be that very soon Indian foundations should be at the global level solving global issues. We don't need global institutions coming to India to solve the problem. We need Indian companies to the globe to solve global problems, because I think we've got a great amount of depth of understanding of issues. We've got a long journey as a nation going through all kinds of challenges, social, political, whatnot. And I think those learnings are extremely precious for the rest of the world to take from us. So when we talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam kind of a concept, the whole world being one family, I think we should be leading from the front as foundations. I mean, this is what my wish is, since you asked me to think aloud, that we should be the next, the change agents globally, not just within the country. That's one. Second, I think at a personal level, I believe that I would continue to operate, to build institutions and institutions which are supposed to bring in a difference, not just do something. I mean, doing a program, doing something, implementing a program is not sufficient enough. If an institution is bringing in a difference in a small geography, in a particular sector, fine. But bringing in a difference, I think that's what is most important. So at a personal level, I think I would continue to nurture institutions who can bring in a difference. And for last few years, while we've been working as JSW Foundation, lot of firsts, lot of differences that we are trying to bring in. I think that appetite to take risks, look at new projects, take them to scale. I think to me, scale comes very important because without scale, we are not good enough. Without scale, we are not relevant. We are talking about such a populous country. If we do not do programs which are not sufficient in size and which we do not try breaking the manner in which things have been done in the past, I think then it does not make any difference. So when we partnered with a number of other organizations to work on skill impact bond, the idea was that it is not about doing skilling, it is about defining or rather redefining how skill development needs to be done in the country. So I think to bring in a difference at an institutional level, and then I think not missing out on key things which are very relevant to a local context also. So while you may operate at a global level, you may look at the national level, for example, a lot of women economic empowerment programs that we are trying to structure, but at the same time not compromising on or missing out on the opportunities which are available at a local level. Local rural sports, for example, or sports talent which this country has got in all its nook and corners. These Asian Games, 31 participants in the Asian Games were from JSW. So they were all supported by JSW. So how do we connect sports from rural areas to an institution which can nurture this talent, which can take this thing to the next level globally? I think that's where we are looking at. We have got snippets of art, culture, heritage strewn across the entire country. How do we work on each one of them to make sure that our cultural heritage is protected? How do we work on all those small little nuances which are going to add to the well-being of our people? Can we work upon all of them? So not missing out the local context, thinking big at the national level, and being ambitious and aspirational enough to look at the global stage. I think I'll stop at that.
Quite an ambitious agenda. Nidhi, I'm going to go to you next. HCL Foundation has obviously been doing a very, very wide range of activities, right? It's a whole range of intervention areas. You've been creating fairly innovative programs, many of them being the first of their kind within this space. What for you is the next step? What's the next 10 years about that is going to be significantly better and bigger than what the last 10 were?
Thanks for that question. Again, you put me in a challenging space, but I was just thinking and reflecting. I was writing executive summary of our own annual report last night, and I was like, how should it start? And the report will be out soon, and it's up for reading then. The report is called Ecosystems of Impact. And we kept the name after a lot of reflection, and each year it's a challenge that how are we going to shape our next and next. And we started, when I was writing, and I wrote that sentence that impact is not about numbers. Impact is about how well, and how is very important there, that how well we have strengthened the ecosystems that can hold it. So I think 10 years have been investment, I would say, investment of various kinds. Investment in strategic design, in thinking, in understanding the space within the nuances of the CSR law. How do you still kind of keep the creative independence alive? How do we still go and do the best which is needed for the country towards nation building, which is needed for communities and planet? And last 10 years, I think each day there has been, and there are my colleagues in the room, there hasn't been a single day where we do not reflect. We come together and we reflect each day that we started like this, and how did it go? I mean, there are so many examples of flagship programs, HCL Tech Grant. Many of you are already partnering or you have been a part of the process. This grant has now gone global. We were discussing institutional mechanisms. We have ourselves instituted an America's grant on climate action because of the popularity of the model. There are rural development programs like Samuday, which by itself is one of the leading models in rural development space. Uday, which won the National CSR Award, Best in Industry, one of its kinds which actually gets into the most underprivileged and most left out communities within urban spaces, has clearly showcased that it is possible to break the cycle of urban poverty within stipulated time period. Then we have Harit, which has environment, very clearly the biodiversity impact has begun. We've just recently, we were, presenting to our CSR committee, there are more than 240 species, unique species, which are being reported at our own sites, which were, kind of waste lands, kind of in just about 3 to 4 years ago. Talking about sports, Akshay and Divya have done us proud by bagging silver in Asian Games recently in rugby, which is such a, it's not popular. I mean, it's played backwards if many of you have seen the game. And that's from highly underprivileged sections, that grassroots sports that we work with children. Jerlin has, got so many, and she got an Arjuna Award from President of India recently. So I think this ecosystem of impact, which has got created with several stakeholders, public-private partnerships have been built up, models have been strengthened, and I would say it's a little too early to just shake everything and move on to the next journey. One really needs to keep contributing and see that how these models are flourishing as we go, and are we able to hold the impact? Are we able to sustain together the impact that we have created? Next 10 years will skew heavily towards conservation, environment, because that is one of the, I would say, pressing needs, and the results are phenomenal. CSR really promises that, I would say, impact. We would need to continue to focus on some of the realities which still exist on ground, and we should not just be glamorized that everything has been taken care of. Even simple interventions which were thought that, oh, we have come over it, and things like reproductive health, family planning, both non-communicable, communicable diseases, they are also on rise. Rather, there are many communities which have not achieved the total fertility rate of 2.1. The total fertility rate is still more than 3, and so on. There are far-flung areas that really need to be reached out. Population influx is high. So I think it's important that we remain connected in the coming 10 years. We do not get glamorized or be carried away. Oh, we've done so much now, let's stop doing this and let's go on to the next journey. We would need to continue to pay attention to basics. At the same time, I think now is a time for us to also, with the CSR funding, whatever has happened, shape some of the global models. HCL Tech America's grant is one such model, but there are communities out there in Africa or Caribbeans, and so many communities out there that Indian space can be represented and can really show direction. So that is also going to happen because there is a lot of empirical evidence that we've been able to produce. It's going to be a very hopeful journey. I can promise that to you, and it would be better than what it was, because we have so much of professionalism and so much of passion which has got added. And young people are joining this space, which is truly phenomenal. So another 10 years are going to be more and more fruitful, as I can see. Yeah.
What do you mean by young people?
We are still young. Younger people.
So I'm going to change gears and move to Sakina. Sakina, would love to hear from your perspective, what's likely to change in the next 10 years? Obviously, great stuff is happening. Great stuff will keep happening. But what are the shifts that you are seeing as possible shifts in the next 10 years, especially if if you had the choice, you would heavily go spend your time, spend your money behind that, because according to you, that is what matters.
Well, I don't see a lot of change happening in the CSR space, to be very honest. Our problems are not going to get dissolved or vanish. It is still going to be there, and we will have to invest in them. We will have to work on them. We will have to work on sustainability, but at the same time, we'll have to work on service delivery. So that's not going to change. If you think that all of a sudden India will become a developed country in the next 10 years, that's not going to happen. So reality is something that we have to face. However, we are going to be more advanced technologically. We will have more innovations in CSR space. In the morning, I think Bhomik in his speech, he talked about the competitors sitting here in CSR audience. I think that would diminish quite a bit in the next 10 years, because in CSR, they cannot be competitors. In CSR, there can only be supporters. They can handhold each other, learn from each other's experience, and go on together, because I think gone are the days when we go solo. 10 years are going to be collaboration. 10 years are going to be coming together and talking about one thing at a time. I have seen a lot of shift happening in the past 2 years in that space. A lot of discussions happening. If they may not have materialized into concrete actions, but they will. 10 years are going to be there for us to look at technology, look at digitalization, look at collaboration, look at sustainability with service delivery as a part of it. But at the same time, also be able to check and understand and absorb each other's differences, learn from each other, give inputs to each other in terms of what learning I have, what I can learn, what I can add, and also at the same time have a broader view of disappointments also. Because I would not say the law is not going to change. It has been changing in the past 10 years. It will still change. And please be ready for surprises and be ready for tackling those surprises in a very positive manner. The sector has been facing a lot of issues. I'm talking about the non-profit sector. The corporate sector has to be more collaborative, be approachable in terms of building capacities of the sector. And I think that's the only way when we can take up social development ahead. So if we have to go hand in hand, if CSR doesn't have to become CSR only and only SR, social responsibility, then NGOs and non-profits and this word has to finish, off the dictionary. We have to say that it's social responsibility, whether done by government, whether done by corporate, or whether done by non-profit organization. That line has to diminish in the next 10 years, and I hope it happens. And I hope all of you who are working in this space would know that how important it is to happen, how important it is for India to set that example, because we are the only country in the world which has this law.
Thank you, Sakina, for that frank assessment. And I think that is a reality. I could not agree more. The fact that there will be surprises coming along the way on the legal front, as well as on the fact that each company will have agendas set the way they are set, and you have to operate within that space and then make this difference happen. Absolutely, could not agree more. Chetan, coming to you. What's your dream run for the next 10 years, if you had no constraints to worry about?
Well, I wish. But before coming to that, Sumit, I think it's important to understand that while we talk about the CSR law as just the last 10 years, but CSR itself as an idea has been around for much longer, and so of course has been the sector. Now, if you look at where we stand now over the last not just the 10 years, but even more, I think some of the challenges, some of the problems that we've been grappling with have actually gotten more intensified. If you look at education, for example, while we may have addressed and to some extent solved the access and the enrollment issue, but the key challenge of learning outcomes continues to haunt us. In fact, if you think about it, the fact that 75 years since independence, we are still talking about foundational literacy and numeracy, and are still trying to understand how kids of grade 2 can actually read grade 2 text. It means that these are some almost insurmountable challenges that we are looking at. Along with this, we've got new themes that have gotten added. So when I entered the sector, for example, we had not heard of climate change as something to be, worked on. But now, as was just mentioned, that's probably going to become one of the most important themes in times to come. And not that you can let go of the education and the skill development and the healthcare, but you'll have to just add to that. So it's obvious that we as a sector, those of us who are in the CSR space, will need to learn from the past to respond to the future with a certain degree of difference. I'm an eternal optimist, and I think what this is going to teach us is what has just been expressed is that how do we really start to collaborate and partner? It's not like we've not spoken about partnerships all this while, but how do you really partner? How do you sort of let go of certain things? Because that's important when you have to collaborate and partner. How do you go into the details? I think that's one very important change that needs to happen when we are into solving some of the intense problems that you're talking about. Because, as we know, the devil is in the details, but so is God. Okay? So we'll have to go into the nuances, the things that we sometimes tend to overlook when we take decisions at the boardroom level about the kind of changes that you would want to bring. And third, I think it's very important to be very clear that none of us can really solve a problem by ourselves, right? I think it was in the GIVE report that came out recently that the entire CSR spend is about 1% of the total social sector spend. Now that itself means that our capacity to take on a challenge at a very large scale is limited if we say that, okay, we are the ones who are going to solve it, right? So the best thing that we can do is to create a possible, or attempt a possible solution which can be easily replicated, and which we have to be very open and transparent about sharing. Okay, so in the sector, I've heard about IP several times, but then obviously we have to move a lot more towards open source than towards IP, right? So I think some of these are the directions that need to come. In fact, if you just zoom out and think about it, 10 years is actually still a very small period of time in the larger scheme of things. I would look at it as a 10-year-old child who's just recently begun to be more self-aware and understand that in order to get a few things, you have to learn to work with other kids, in order to. So I think that's where we are. And I would say that the next 10 years, we are definitely going to get more mature as a sector. We are actually going to hopefully take at least a slice of a problem and attempt to solve it. If not the whole. I mean, education, for example, is an area where we've spoken about foundational literacy and numeracy in the same breath. But if you just pick up numeracy, for example, the challenge of how do you get a third grader to understand the concept of place value of numbers is something which itself is an area which a lot of us have been grappling with. So you need to take a slice of the problem, go at it, and sort of solve it. So that would be my take on this.
Thank you, Chetan.
Can I just add something? I just now Googled while he was saying, US, the reading levels at 4th grade, 34% children are below that grade level, appropriate level. 27% children in grade 8 in the US are below the reading levels for that particular grade. So I'm just trying to give one direction, suggestion is that we may continue to look at the swarm of problems that we have, but let us also understand that those are not plaguing only us. If the US also has 37% children below the reading levels of grade 4, then I think we are not too bad off. So therefore, rather than just looking at problems as they manifest themselves in front of us, it would be to pick up what Chetan said, dissect the problem into what we can do to improve upon. Nobody is saying no to that. But at the same time, not get bogged down by that this 34% is less. The remaining 76%, 66% which is there in our hands, that should create those opportunities of excellence. And that's how we'll continue to provide doctors and engineers and managers to the rest of the world.
So I'm going to take a slightly different theme from there. I think I'm going to pick up from what Chetan you said. Collaboration is something we would all love to do, but very few of us do. In reality, in CSR, collaboration is aspirational. It's not really happened as much on the ground today. But that's collaboration between, let's say, multiple CSR players. The other side of collaboration is CSR working with implementation partners who are the bedrock of what CSR actually delivers on the ground. Without that, there is no action on the ground, right? And I want to ask the panel, and I'm keeping in mind the time clock which is ticking on us, that I would request everybody to be really, really brief about this, but I do want you to share the one message that you would want to leave with NGOs, with social enterprises who are your partners today and who you want to partner with tomorrow to make your next 10 years be better, right? What's that message that you want to leave with them for them to be a part of that future?
I think the message is short and crisp. Please study the corporate that you want to approach. Don't randomly go everywhere, because that puts off and consumes time of people. Corporates who are very much into the CSR space, seriously in the CSR space, want to partner with NGOs who are in the similar thematic areas that they work on. Please understand the law, please understand compulsions of the corporate also, and please also study the corporate what they are working on. Be prepared. We're not saying, we're not expecting you to be prepared like a corporate does, but we are expecting you to prepare yourself for what the corporate is already doing, so that it saves your time, it saves the time of the corporate, but at the same time have that view of how things are changing across technologically or otherwise in the social development space. While an NGO in the grassroots may not be able to deliver that to a corporate who is funding it, become a channel between that NGO and the corporate, so that a corporate is able to understand what is happening on ground. Most of the time, what I also see is that the corporates will have to take some level of an understanding to go into the field and see what is happening. Not sit in the AC offices and decide for people, but at the same time, the NGOs will have to come up and pull up their act in terms of approaching the right corporate with the right proposals and the right way of doing it. And that's what is the minimum ask. The rest, obviously, I think my panelists would be more than happy to say.
Chetan, any message that you would want to leave with?
I would echo what Sakina just said. I think the issue of alignment is important. When we work with NGOs, one of the things that we definitely look for is alignment of objectives. So, you may as an organization be doing great work when it comes to, let's say, core healthcare, but if that's not a priority for us, then even if we want, we would probably not, support. So it's important for organizations to do that research, to understand that, CSRs are not mere funders, that there would be an objective, there would be an intent to, try and address certain issues. And it's important for organizations to, tailor their proposal or their conversation to that.
Ashwini?
First of all, I think time for bilateral relationships are over. This is the era of convergence, and therefore, if I may just deviate from what you said in the earlier thing, please compete, because competition would bring up the best out of you. Please compete and please converge. Don't collaborate, because convergence would be the marriage of the best possible ideas, the best possible ways of doing things. See, there is a whole lot of change happening. Technology is taking away that divide by which NGOs at some point of time were the last mile delivery institutions. That is gone. You have IT-enabled systems coming in, G2C platforms coming up. So that whole system is going to change. So don't say that we are the last mile delivery partners. I don't call them as vendors, but partners. So forget that. Technology is going to take away that space from you. That's number one. Number two, a whole lot of innovation is happening in the social enterprises space. Where are they missing? They are missing on how to scale it up in the rural areas. Two, they are not aware in a sensitive manner as to how those things, those solutions can actually pan out in the rural areas. So you can bring on sensitivity to the platform. The innovation can actually come from the social enterprises. Resources are there with the government. Some corporates would also like to soil hands with you on the ground. I think this convergence model is the only one which is going to happen. And it cannot be an NGO-corporate relationship. It has to be an NGO, corporate, social enterprise, government, so on and so forth. I mean, this whole multi-sectoral convergence model is the only way of solving problems.
Nidhi, I know you do have a point of view on technology taking over what NGOs do. So would love to talk, would love for you to talk about that. on how do you see NGOs playing a role in the next 10 years?
No, I think, again, it's about partnerships and how much we respect each other in a partnership. I think that's very critical. And day in and day out, and I would, first of all, convey my gratitude to more than 200 partners in more than 20 states of India and a workforce of 2,000 people that works and makes our projects real. But there are certain things which we see, and we constantly do capacity building through our symposiums, and I had made a little list that will really help us. Of course, technology is important. I mean, it's critical. We got to embrace it. We got to upgrade ourselves. Whatever it is, we just got to, with our staff members, learn technology. That's completely something we cannot compromise. But couple of things which will show us a great future is invest in second line. We are really finding it very difficult to sustain some of the best projects in absence of a good second line with many of our partners, and that is one of the biggest blockage. Despite 16,000, 17,000 registrations against an RFP to identify the best ones. Leadership engagement is critical. Once something has been signed up, I don't want to say that, but let me say that there's a platform. We are left with just the teams of the NGO. Even after 1 or 2 years, we don't see the leader, and then it is the leadership distribution which was expected as a part of the MOU really doesn't happen. And the first expectation in partnership is that we are going to have that leadership coming from ground. And that somewhere gets disappeared, and that's where partnerships do not last. Be available, scale only as much as one can. Even we are reflecting internally that let's not scale up because funding is available. Let's scale up when we identify the unmet need and we really want to work towards it. A few things, you can always join the CSR law course on HCL Foundation Academy. It's free of cost, offered by us if you really want to upgrade yourself on the law. Respond to RFPs, please, with proper applications. There are no shortcuts. We really need to write our applications well because there is, and I would disagree that we take decisions single-handedly or we take decisions, or I have the authority to take the decision. It is so distributed in a systems approach that there are subject matter experts, there are team members, there is an M&E department, there's a finance, there's a legal, there's an audit. We really need to satisfy, and unless there's a well-documented application, it is very difficult to defend your case. Just a last one, I think ethics will continue to guide us no matter what. We really need to remain ethical because we belong to a sector which is driven by empathy, and these two E's go very well together. We should not lose sight of that together and need to maintain that respect in the relationship. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you, all of you, for sharing all of those lovely insights. I would love to throw this open for questions now. I know we are short on time, so we'll be only able to take a few questions. We'll start with the lady in pink there, who was the first one to raise her hand.
Firstly, thank you for the interesting discussion. Something that came about towards the end was just the humanizing aspect of this relationship, right? And I feel like all of you spoke about it. So what is it that we can do as, I don't know what, like, I don't want to call it beneficiaries, whatever, but stakeholders in this larger scheme of social development to humanize, let's say, the fundee, whatever relationship. I don't want to give it names. But yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about, humanizing it with a tone of, let's say, convergence.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, actually, let's do that.
I mean, just to sum it, I mean, it will not move if it's not human and it doesn't. See, in my, like in HCL, we often say that while the finance could be the brain, CSR is heart of the organization. So it has to be at a human interaction level. What can happen is engagement, which should happen constantly at the field level. So we must travel together, we must work together at the community level, which is very important. It cannot be donor-donee relationship. Those projects will not sustain.
So we can take 2 more questions, and I'm going to ask for both questions together. 1 and 2, and then we'll try and answer those so that we stick within the time limit. Yeah? Okay.
Thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful session. Hello. Yeah. So it was a wonderful session. Thank you for your insights. Just that I wanted to understand what kind of programs, like going in the future, we have had a very specific set of programs. That is what we do, like at the very grassroots level. So what is the changes in the pattern of those programs while being an implementer? How do we see that transitioning over a period of time, like in the coming days? So what is the expectation from a donor's perspective, or maybe the need of the hour as well? So that is what I would like
So
to
how
hear.
programs are likely to change?
Right.
Right? Yeah. And the second question? Yes. Okay. So let's do this. We're just going to address this question and leave it at that. Yeah, because we're really out of time. Sorry. But you can meet us outside, and we'll, of course, like to address as many as we can. How are programs likely to change in the kind of programs that CSR is looking to fund? Do we feel there is any particular pattern to it? Would any of you like to take that? Chetan?
How they are going to change? I think programs need to constantly change, constantly evolve. You know, there's always the field, the kind of issues that we are grappling with. There's never a constant. I mean, very specifically look at skill development, for example. We've been working in this space for the last 10 years now, and we've seen that both from the supply side, which is the youth, and the demand side, which is the market, there's been a constant evolution. So as an implementer, unless you pay attention to both these sides, keep a pulse on what are the kind of changes that are happening, and make sure that you bring in elements into your program which are evolving accordingly. You know, it doesn't work otherwise.
Thank you. And thank you, Sakina, Ashwini, Nidhi, and Chetan, for taking the time and for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.